Goku vs Tirek, by Rainbow Sparkle 3. Chapter 1. The ultimate battle begins. I was gasping and panting, every single short breath burning my lungs, all the muscles in my body urging me to stop, but I couldn't, not when he was there, looking for me. I flew as fast as my aching wings would take me, which was very fast even with me being as worn out as an elderly pony, after they've run a 100,000-meter marathon. I soon arrived at my destination, darting my head around to look for Tirek, who would be really easy to spot, with him being larger than the biggest mountain. Oh, right, you probably want to hear about what happened. It started off with me and Tirek battling in Ponyville. We were evenly matched, and neither of us were showing any signs of being worn down. Tirek eventually tried blackmail with my friends, but I hid them as soon as they were released, before he could steal my magic. Then, we continued fighting, but my inexperience with the new alicorn magic I possessed was my downfall. He managed to defeat me, and almost stole my magic, but then I teleported to a hidden spot in the battlefield, and he had nothing to do, as he had no way of figuring out where I was. So, I'm guessing he just figured out a way to steal magic from non-equine sources, and began slowly gaining power. First, he started stealing magic from plants, leaves, and grass, which only increased his magic by the amount of an average pony, so I wasn't too worried. But then he moved on to more things. Trees, the air, lakes, you name it, and he's got it. He started growing, and the bigger he got, the more things he could absorb magic from. Eventually, I flew away from him as he got to almost twice his regular size. I concentrated a high-density, high magic beam for over a minute, then blasted it at him with full force. The beam was incredibly huge, and each square meter was packed with far stronger magic than anything I had used up till now. Despite this, however, when it hit a more than 50 feet tall Tirek, engulfing his entire body, and creating an explosion with power rivaling the elements of harmony, that incinerated the ground up to 100 feet downwards, and probably would have left a ton of radiation, if I hadn't used a spell that would counter that. It still only broke his concentration and hurt him a little. As evident from the scratch marks left on his body and the way he stumbled. Tirek looked to the source of the surprise attack, and when he spotted me, his eyes narrowed, and he glared at me, fury blazing in his yellow, flame-like pupils. I'll admit it, I was scared. I had just used my last resort, and it had completely and utterly failed. I was about to run for my life, or should I say fly, when Tirek used his magic to trap me. I writhed around, but it was futile. I sighed in resignation, then prepared to have my magic stolen, and Equestria ruled by Tirek. I waited, but then I realized nothing happened, and Tyrek's expression had turned from enraged to amused. I was confused at this sudden turn of events, but then he spoke. Well, it was more like shouting to me, since his voice was a lot louder now. I could simply absorb your magic right now, but where would be the fun in that? I'll make you watch helplessly as I become stronger and stronger than anything you can imagine. Then, once I become the most powerful thing alive, you will be wishing you had stopped me, before it was too late, and I will steal your magic. I silently cursed him for this blatant show of cruelty, as he dropped me, and I fell to the ground, injuring my right arm, which was the point of contact. Bah! I yelped, rubbing my arm. I stared up at the continually growing, cackling Tirek with a look of apoplexy that was as angry as his. When I attacked him, I used a high-power spell that quickly healed my arm. Then I started to fly away, to think of a way to beat him. I went to the place I had dropped off my friends at, and we tried to think of a plan. Discord was the first to say anything. Before we discussed a plan though, before we battled Tirek, I want to give you this medallion. Tirek lied when he said he gave me it to show his gratitude and loyalty, but when I say it is a sign of our true friendship, I'm telling the truth, he finished, placing the medallion he had received from Tirek gently onto my neck. Immediately, it started glowing with rainbow light, and in that moment, I knew it was the last key. Yeah, I think that might be the last one we need. Applejack asked. We have to get to the chest, I declared, running off in the direction of the Tree of Harmony, my friends following me. However, before we could even get halfway there, we saw Tirek, now over 1,000 feet tall, stomping in our direction. Oh, he seems to think he's spent enough time stealing magic from the environment. Now he's coming after my magic, I exclaimed, looking fearfully in the direction of the 1,200 feet. No, 1,500, no, 2,000. Never mind his size. The point was, I couldn't let him get my magic. Did I hear ya right? He's stealing magic from the environment. Applejack asked, looking at the still growing 3,000 feet tall monster. Yeah, don't ask me how he's doing it, or how he figured it out, but he's doing it, I said impatiently. I need to get away from him. If he gets my magic, Equestria is certain to fall. Everyone agreed with me, and so I flew off, looking behind as I did so, at my friends and the 5,000 feet tall tyrant. And so that's what led up to this, me flying at max speed, wandering aimlessly across the gloomy, dark sky. That's when I remembered the chest, and I stopped, spinning around, and flapping my wings harder than ever, hoping I could get there before even what's in the chest isn't enough to stop the probably at this point 7,000 feet or more Tirek. Just as the Tree of Harmony appeared in my line of vision, giving me a spark of hope, I was stopped by a sound far greater than that of the biggest earthquakes. I slowly turned around to the source of the noise, fearing what I might see, and the sight that greeted me froze me in place, and filled me with dread to no end. Tirek was towering over me, his mountain-sized claw tips razor-sharp, his continent-sized horns piercing the heavens. His pupils looked like flames before, now they seemed more akin to the hottest pits of an active volcano, and even more so like the gates of Tartarus. His smirk was filled with shark-like fangs, pointed to perfection. He had fists that looked more like moons, and his huge, that wouldn't even begin to describe the size of his legs. They were indescribably, incredibly, enormously colossal would be most accurate. Needless to say, Tirek was pretty much a walking planet at this point, so much so I was surprised Earth had the power to hold him. Then again, perhaps the planet had magic like equestrians do that could hold extra weight than what should be scientifically possible. I'll have to look into that later. Getting back on topic, I simply gawked at the massive Tirek for a while, and he cackled with malice, which literally shook Equestria. After a few seconds, whilst he continued growing at an alarming rate, he roared, for him, set at a normal volume, impressed, are you? At this rate, I'll be bigger than a galaxy, and you'll be tinier than a tiny speck of dust compared to me. I hope you're prepared for eternity under my rule, because that's inevitable at this point. By now, he decided to use his magic to fly, just so he wouldn't crush the planet with his solar system-sized frame. I didn't want to accept it, but I didn't see a way out of this. Even something powered by the elements of harmony couldn't stop this monstrosity, could it? Even if it was near impossible, I had to give it a shot, so I put on my best confident face, and said with as much bravado as I could muster, me and my friends can't stop you with these. He merely laughed at this bold remark, until there was suddenly a huge explosion and a flash of blinding, golden light right in between the two of us, and when it disappeared, standing there, was the human. I sensed his power, and feeling it was far greater than mine, I was shocked for a few seconds, and then flew down, to watch what would obviously be a battle, that would decide the fate of the universe, between the mysterious human, and at this point, the near universe size, billions of galaxies size, Tirek. Chapter 2 Goku's Warm-Up. As soon as the explosion from my rival dissipated, I saw in front of myself a huge red beast. I didn't know who he was, but I did know he was strong, as evident from his extremely high ki. And so, I decided to battle him. The beast had covered his eyes from the flash, and when he opened his eyes, to see what had happened, he just stared at me for a bit, then laughed. Hawk, hawk, hawk. I was worried when I saw that bright light, but now I see my fears were for nothing. A tiny wrinkle on my skin is far larger than you. I assume you came to defeat me, but you are deeply mistaken if you think you can fight me. I'll humor you for a bit, and battle you. To be fair, I'll shrink my size, which would actually be in a way to your detriment, since that increases my power. After that rather long bit of exposition, he became surrounded in a large, red glow, while he began shrinking at an extremely quick rate. In less than a minute, he was somehow just over 20 feet tall, and he was now several times more powerful, which wasn't exactly the best of things for me. Anyways, I got in a fighting position, and was about to power up, but then I noticed a purple unicorn with wings flying at the red monster, her horn crackling with intense power. When she got close enough, she assaulted him with a turret-speed barrage of blasts for half a minute, engulfing the beast with smoke and remnants of purple energy. I just stared at the random unicorn that had appeared out of nowhere, who was now panting heavily, until she said to the monster covered in smoke with a hint of triumph in her voice, "Are you gonna just shrug that off now that you're this size, Tirek?" As the purple pony smiled, the smoke vanished, revealing the monster apparently named Tirek, who had not even a scratch on him, which the pony responded to with a shocked look, a quick chuckle, and a hasty teleportation, which seemed to be a lot like my instant transmission. With that weird winged unicorn gone, we both quickly looked towards each other again, and I became a Super Saiyan, to test his power. A yellow aura surrounded my body, my muscles became bulkier and more toned, my eyes turned from pure black to a light blue, my clothes rose, and I yelled at the top of my lungs, the ground cracking underneath my boots as I transformed. After I was done my ascension, my aura faded and everything became still in the air around us. Breaking the silence after a good 10 seconds of staring, trying to read each other's moves, I swiftly moved to the opposite side of Tirek and shot a quick, medium-intensity ki blast at him, hoping to catch him off guard. However, Tirek was tougher than I thought, and when it hit him square in the middle of his back, he didn't even flinch. He then responded with a quick shot of his own, which I deftly avoided. After this quick display of techniques, I decided that my current state definitely wasn't enough with a foe of this caliber, so I clenched my fists together and roared, my yellow hair shining and expanding, an even larger golden aura around my even bulkier body. The ground under me was being crushed so utterly, it was now more than 10 feet lower than the rest of the battlefield, and the hole was being enlarged by the second. Finally, when I had finished my Super Saiyan 3 transformation, I glared at Tirek for a long period of time, and he returned the look, seeming like he was beginning to realize the man he was facing was no wimp. This staring contest lasted for a long time, and the ominous silence that hung over the gloomy, red sky was broken in an instant by me using instant transmission to get 50 feet in the air directly above him, then firing a massive Kamehameha at him from above. My nickname for this combo is Blue Pain from the Heavens. He immediately lifted his head to look at me, but his eyes were instead met with a powerful wave of pure energy that engulfed his entire titanic body. I remained where I was, waiting for the debris to vanish. When it did, I gasped when I saw that it had barely made him flinch, and there still wasn't a single scratch inside on his huge body. However, he did seem to be serious now, as my attacks were actually beginning to hurt him, even if only a tiny bit. It seems I had slightly underestimated you. I think it's about time you stopped mocking me, and you revealed your true power. It's obvious you're just testing me at this point, Tirek said in an irate tone. I smirked, nodding in mute respect at his correct estimation of my power. You're right, I'm not even close to my full power yet. When I'm done, you won't be so confident, I asserted, certain of my victory. I clenched my fists so tight that my nails actually began to pierce my skin, a small stream of blood sliding down my arm. I moved my feet further apart from each other, and I lowered my head in a state of complete focus and intense concentration. The ground beneath me instantly got crushed more than 500 feet downwards. A faint blue aura enshrouded my body in a bright glow of superpower, and to top it all off, a huge thunderstorm started brewing in the massive clouds above, starting off as a downpour of rain, the rapid pitter-patter of the raindrops giving some small amount of tranquility to the chaotic, demolished battlefield of two gods with near omnipotent strength. Things got even more chaotic from there. The ground was being incinerated at a rate of more than 50 feet per second. The aura around me got darker and bigger with each passing moment, and the downpour escalated into an ultra-fast rainstorm with flashes of lightning and booms of thunder that sounded like nuclear explosions at least once every 5 seconds. The rain muddied the area, and soon the musty smell of grass and mud attacked my nostrils. A very unpleasant taste was left in my mouth, and I closed my mouth, just so I wouldn't have to taste that wet environment. After nearly a minute of powering up, I screamed at the very top of my lungs, and there was suddenly a blinding flash of light along with a gargantuan explosion that shook the world. After the lights slowly vanished, everything was calm. I stood facing Tirek with narrowed eyes. My hair was a vibrant blue, with a likewise color aura around my muscular body. The same color was my eyes, and to finish off the overall impression of blue, even the name of this form was Super Saiyan Blue. We both stood, a huge amount of tension hanging over the red sky. All was quiet, except for the almost silent sound of us breathing and the constant noise of rain battering the already demolished landscape. Then, like a sudden flash of lightning, it was shattered. Chapter 3 Battle of Gods, again. I stood high up in the mountains, watching the battle down below between two fighters with godlike strength, my eyes wide open as I saw their epic fight for the fate of the universe. Everything in the environment surrounding them was utterly demolished. Not a single tree, bush, or even a single blade of grass remained in the throes of their battlefield. The smell of smoke from all the explosions lingered in the air, and drifted up to my nose. I winced from the horrible smell, using a spell to cast off the unpleasant, and not to mention unhealthy, plume of smoke, then resumed watching the match. The mysterious human I later found out was Goku now had blue hair, after he had transformed, and now had his hands close together, a blue ball of magic forming in between them. Ooh! I squealed excitedly, a new form of magic even I've never seen before. Research time. I hastily took out the bottle of ink, the quill, and the scroll I always had with me, spilling a little bit of ink onto the grass, which had luckily not been incinerated in the battle, otherwise I would have been toast too. Getting back on topic, I lied down in a comfortable position on the soft, lush grass, and held the paper up with my magic, then dipped the quill into the ink bottle at my side, and began taking notes as quickly as I could. After settling down in this peaceful mountaintop, I was about to look down when suddenly there was a boom that nearly deafened me. I looked down into the battlefield, and saw nothing but smoke. I was getting impatient with all the smoke. I was reminded of the great and powerful Trixie back in the day, and used my magic to clear up the smoke quicker. Then I saw Goku holding his hands forward in a symmetrical position. I was confused by this, until I remembered the blue orb of energy he had been holding. Oh, he must have shot that magic out somehow. Too bad I wasn't watching. Wait, I remember him shooting a blue beam at Tirek earlier, except then he only held his hands together for a split second, not even a blue orb in his hands. I guess that means this had more energy put into it. As I finished this thought, I saw Tirek, who was actually hurt, and had a lot of scratches on his body, as well as a few scrapes and cuts. Yes, the unstoppable centaur was moderately injured. I smiled down at Goku, who had noticed me from using my magic to clear up the smoke, and he smiled back at me, putting his thumbs up, and shouting at me, "Don't worry about this world, I'll defeat him and everything will be peaceful." Well, he was definitely friendly, so I nodded my head at him, and got back to taking notes on my parchment. Once Tirek had recovered after a brief period of time, he looked more furious than he had ever been before. His fists were clenched so tight I was worried they would literally shatter under the pressure. His narrowed eyes showed pupils that were now actually gushing out flames and wreaths of black smoke, so I will use this metaphor in a non-metaphorical sense. His eyes were blazing. He had also increased his size by about 3 feet in a state of pure rage, and in fact, I don't even think he realized his slight increase in size. Tyrek's huge horns were cracking with arcs of raw, untamed magic, and he yelled towards Goku, "How dare you do damage to a god? I was holding back before, but no longer. I will show no mercy to you anymore." He swung his head in Goku's path, and unleashed a blast of magic amplified with rage, making it much stronger. However, when Goku quickly unleashed his magic beam again, shouting, "Kamehameha," and sending his attack to meet Tirek, they were evenly matched. Despite this, Tirek smiled with malice as both of their attacks fizzled into thin air. "So I see you can match me like this. Even though I'm at full power, I'm currently using a weak blast," Tirek declared with confidence and arrogance in his very loud voice. "I'm not even using a 5% power beam, yet you're struggling. Just accept defeat, you can't win this fight." At this news, Goku opened his eyes wide and muttered so quietly I had to use a spell to hear. So he's one of those Frieza types. Darn. I might have to use the Kaioken. Naturally, I was confused by this, and so I scribbled down a quick note about his latest statement. When I looked up next, I saw Goku preparing another beam in between his hands, and he was chanting, K-A-A-M-E-E-H-A-A, me. I could feel the entire universe trembling simply from him charging up, so I did what any unicorn/alicorn would do. I cast an impenetrable protective bubble around my area, and I went as far away from the battle as possible without losing sight of the fighters. While Goku charged a blast, Tirek did the same, even larger sparks of dark, powerful magic dancing around his whole body now, which also shook the world. Goku's eyes turned white, and an aura that looked like blue flames swirled and grew around him. The next moment, he yelled at the top of his lungs, "Hey!" And he shot his hands forward, sending a huge blast rocketing towards Tirek, and simultaneously, Tirek slowly brought his horns back, then at light speed, directed them at Goku, and unleashed a similarly sized beam as his, which exploded out from between his horns at the exact same time Goku's did. The two super powerful blasts met each other midway, and the two fighters' beams slowly moved back and forth, neither able to push the other back substantially. I jotted down on my scroll a note about beams clashing, then continued watching. Goku was starting to sweat, and his hands lowered slightly, while Tirek looked perfectly relaxed. He even dared to use his magic to pick up a twig that had survived the battle, drawing a picture of himself flicking Goku in the head, which filled me with apoplexy. Goku was giving his all, and Tirek wasn't even being respectful. Oh, sorry, getting off track. Tirek, after finishing his drawing, spoke. You know, now I'm using approximately 5% of my power. You won't be able to beat me, but I'll give you a deal. If you worked with me to rule Equestria, I won't continue destroying it. Tirek said this in a very devious manner, wearing an infuriating smile. Goku, surprisingly, laughed. This confused Tirek, until Goku said, I've been offered many similar things before, and, you guessed it, I declined every time and won. It's the same thing here. I'll beat you, and restore universal peace. Tirek shrugged and replied with a slightly disappointed tone. Whatever you say, though I honestly don't understand how you expect to defeat me. And believe me, I'm not bluffing when I say I'm using attacks with 1/20th of my power. With that, he charged at Goku, who got in a battle stance, and prepared to punch Tirek, who was raising his own fist, red, magical energy surrounding it. Goku roared a battle cry and shot his fist forwards, colliding it with Tirek's punch. Immediately, Goku recoiled, caressing his hand, and blowing on it quickly. That was 10%, said Tirek with a smug look on his face. I just wanted to go up to him, and smack him so hard. Oh, sorry, I guess I got a little carried away. After rubbing his hand for 10 seconds, he glared at Tirek, and charged up his flaring blue aura. He then clenched his fists tight, then shouted with fury, Hi-ya! His blue energy flashed, and was instantly engulfed in a huge blood-red aura. His blue eyes narrowed. There was shaking like that of an earthquake, and as he yelled, blinding red rays of light blasted outwards from his body, flashing across the entire landscape. After a little while, he planted his feet deep into the ground, shouted, and then his aura suddenly disappeared. I was worried he'd expended too much energy, and that he was drained, but then he clenched his fists tight and yelled, Kaioken. The blue energy surrounded and a big layer of red energy flared again, and was perhaps even bigger than before. He then charged, and began his ferocious assault against Tirek. Chapter 4: The Final Showdown. As soon as I had fully charged up Super Saiyan Blue combined with Kaioken, yelling, Kaioken, I shot myself forwards with an almighty kick to the ground, crushing it and propelling myself forwards. I screamed and, just before I hit Tirek, I veered sideways, the red energy splitting around him, and as I raised my fist, I screeched, ×2. And I landed a direct hit on Tirek's head, making him briefly reel forwards, and in that short interval, I flew around and under him, sending an uppercut kick to his face, making him fly high to the sky. I kicked the ground again, and just as my feet left earth, I upped the power of my Kaioken more. ×3. And I flew at massive speed to the airborne Tirek. Then once I got directly underneath him, I punched and kicked him rapidly higher into the sky. After a few minutes of my close combat assault, we were so high above Earth, the whole sky was pitch black despite it being the middle of the afternoon. It was at this point that I decided we were definitely at an acceptable height, and so I powered to Kaioken ×4, and swiftly flew above him. Tyrek's eyes were shut, presumably from the pain, and he was quietly cursing. I brought both of my fists up high in the air, or should I say lack of air, and with as much force as I could, slammed both of my fists into his stomach, immediately causing Tyrek's eyes to open wide, and he let out a strong puff of air as his body flew back down to earth at a speed that would put light to shame. I clenched my hands together and once again upgraded my Kaioken, this time to a multiplier 5, and I slowly brought my body back, then exploded forward, as if I was shot from an ultra-powerful cannon. To my great surprise, I glimpsed the purple pony in the middle of space encased in a large, colorful bubble, and she was looking down to the quickly shrinking Tirek, then stared at me with awe, and I blinked. To my greater surprise, she was gone the next instant. There was purple energy residue fizzling, so I guess she might have done that same thing she did earlier. After that short interruption, I continued flying downwards, and I saw Tirek, 5,000 kilometers from the ground, who was now beginning to recover. He saw that he was being launched straight into the hard ground and his eyes widened. He began to prepare, and my eyes also widened with worry that all my hard work would be for nothing. So, I grit my teeth, squeezed my fists to the breaking point, and my whole body tensed an extreme amount. At the top of my lungs, I yelled, "Hi-ya!" My blue and red aura expanding slowly, and then, in an instant, all my pent-up ki exploded outwards, increasing the size of my flaring aura by nearly 2 times, and I shrieked, "Kaioken ×10. The entire dimension was crushed under the force of my energy, and it ripped holes into all the other dimensions, destroying every living thing in existence. I would never let my energy get so unconstrained it would do something like that. However, it did send shockwaves throughout the universe, and I immediately caught up with Tirek. Wanting to make sure my plan worked, I punched him in the face, before he could protect himself from the crash landing, and he clutched his face in pain. Then I kicked him in the shin, and I continued this devastating combo, using all my limbs to deal as much damage as possible, and to top it all off, I slammed my punch into his gut on the last blow, and he fell down even quicker than before. For the grand finale, I used instant transmission to teleport to Tyrek's location in an instant and yelled. Then, I clenched my right hand into a tight fist, and I began charging intense ki into it. Then the next moment, I punched him so hard that an explosion rocked the galaxy, and he rocketed towards the ground, smashing the battlefield into an even more demolished landscape, so that you would think an earthquake scale 10 had erupted from the ground. I landed onto what was left of the ground, and I glared at Tirek, temporarily releasing the Kaioken. He lay completely still on the ground for a long time, which was fine with me, since I needed time to recover from all that Kaioken usage. Even though I'd learned to use it at near perfect level, it still took a lot out of me. I waited and waited, for what seemed like an eternity, until I finally spoke to the seemingly unconscious centaur. "I know you're awake. Your ki flow is that of someone conscious. You can't fool me into leaving," I declared, staring at Tirek, angry at him for wasting so much time. He still didn't get up, and my patience was really being tested at this point. "If you don't attack first, I will," I shouted angrily. Just then, his ki flared up, and he raised his head rapidly, shooting a large beam at me. I'll admit it, his trick ended up actually having an effect on me, but I still managed to get out of the way just in time. The red blast was heading right at me, about to severely injure me, but right before, and I mean literally, right before it engulfed me in its searing embrace, I kicked the rock bits underneath me, completely crushing them into dust and little pieces, sending me flying out of reach of the blast, and I landed on a faraway mountain, leaving the beam to fire at what was now a pile of debris. I again charged up the 10 times Kaioken and Tirek came galloping at the mountain I was perched on top of. I heard a squeal from nearby, and I looked up, to see the pony still watching the battle. I soon realized how stupid I was leading Tirek to this pony, who he could easily harm despite the bubble around her. Tirek lobbed an energy blast at me and the watcher above, so I hastily used Ki to create a temporary protective barrier around the mountain we were on. Then I leapt out of the way, nimbly landing on the closest mountain other than the one I had just been on. Tirek followed suit and shot another huge beam, which I deftly avoided. I landed on the ground, and I immediately shot a super Kamehameha at Tirek, which he countered with a huge, red beam. I thought, now is as good a time as any to use that, though there is a good chance it won't work. Hey, I'll try it anyways. It's not like anything'll happen if it doesn't work. So, I gathered up yellow Ki into my hand for exactly 10 seconds, then closed my eyes and shot out the small Ki blast at an expansive plane a few hundred meters away. To my disappointment and embarrassment, it just fizzled out, and made a sound like that of a fart, and Tirek cackled. "What, are you trying to make me laugh to death?" he said in between chuckles. I blushed and responded in an abashed tone. "No, just let me try out this new trick again. I promise it'll work the second time." Tirek merely shrugged and waited with his arms crossed, a small grin on his face. "Darn, I've just made him more confident. Come on, work," I thought as I tried charging up my technique for the second time. I made sure to focus my energy even more. My blue-red aura was more densely packed, and a ton of its energy got sucked in by my new technique. I threw up my right arm with the yellow orb in it, and hurled it at the same plane from a minute ago, and the yellow energy slowly expanded, eventually becoming the size of a mountain. In fact, it did become a mountain. I smiled, knowing that now the hardest part of the technique was done, so the rest would be a cinch. I charged up 2 more Ki blasts and directed them at the newly made mountain. The mountain glowed gold for a few seconds, and then 2 more mountains bursted out of the one mountain, making 3. I repeated this process many times until everywhere you went for a 5-kilometer radius, you'd see at least a dozen huge hills towering above you. Finally finished, I wiped sweat from my face, and leapt onto the closest mountain to me, which stood about 75 meters above Tirek, so it was a pretty small one. Tirek looked surprised at this technique for a few seconds, then asked, "What is that supposed to do? Are you trying to intimidate me with these big hills?" Darn, he always has a witty remark ready. Oh, come on, I was just about to make a cool speech about this technique, but not anymore. You'll just have to see for yourself what this does. I smiled and brought my hand forward, bringing my fingers towards me in a ready gesture. Tirek blasted a huge double beam at the mountain I was on, one of the rays incinerating the artificial hill, the other one shooting past, then redirecting itself at me. I jumped off the mountain when the beam hit it, and spun towards the next mountain, which was hit by Tirek's second beam, almost as soon as I landed. Dust obscured my vision, and I quickly flew outside the smoke, going to the next mountain. Tirek once again sent a powerful beam at me, and this time I shot a Kamehameha to meet it. The resulting explosion gave me time to escape Tirek's line of sight, and I went to a small mountain far away, releasing Super Saiyan Blue along with Kaioken, and hiding my Ki as well as possible. Looking around, Tirek couldn't find me for a while, and in that interval, I grabbed something from my pocket that I'd been saving the whole time. I brought my hand out, and in it was a small, plain brown pouch. It's a good thing I brought this along. If I hadn't, I would have lost very soon, I said to myself, dumping the only senzu bean in there on my bruised hand. I chewed and swallowed on the magical healing bean, and instantly, I was back to full strength, and stronger too, thanks to the power of Saiyans becoming stronger after being injured. I put the small bag back in my pocket, and used instant transmission to get behind him. I then unleashed my newfound strength, and fired a full-power Super Kamehameha at Tirek, momentarily stunning him. Tirek turned around, and blasted at me. This shoot, get shot at, and jump routine got repeated many times over until all the mountains were disintegrated, and nothing but dust remained of the previously proud, tall mountains. Tirek was panting from using all that Ki, but he smiled nevertheless, and spoke in between quick intakes of air. "I don't know what you were planning to do with those mountains, but now, you can't do it. I've incinerated every last one of them." To his surprise, I began laughing. After a good 5 seconds of guffawing, I said in a very amused tone, "You know, the hills being destroyed was part of my plan. Thanks for helping me. Now, it's time to see what I really have in store for you." I raised my hands in the air, and my blue-red aura glowed extra vibrantly as I gathered the necessary energy for maximum effect of the technique. While Tirek smiled at me, he had no idea of the fury about to be unleashed on him. Thunder rumbled across the skies again, and the poor land tired of all this once again trembled, and the sky cried from all this chaos. I'll end this fight soon, so don't worry, me and Tirek will wrap this up quickly, and I'll try to keep this land as intact as possible. As soon as I had finished this thought, I was done charging up, and I shouted, my aura flaring to twice the size of Tirek. Suddenly, dust that was beginning to fade solidified into millions of small rocks amplified with intensely high-focused ki, and the gargantuan army of pebbles fired themselves at Tirek, creating a giant waterfall of dust exploding from Tirek as the stones hit him. Tirek grunted when the massive barrage hit him, and he was clearly angry once the dust cleared, but relatively unharmed. I smirked. The rocks that had assaulted him didn't crumble, and they were actually all intact. The battalion of little soldiers came back for a second attack, and they kept smashing into Tirek again and again. After the 10th flurry of stones, he was fed up with this, and slammed his huge fist at a bunch of the rocks, flinging them backwards. However, this didn't stop the rocks. They became smaller, but more powerful, as the energy was more focused. Tirek, in a blind rage, kept blasting and smashing the bits to little bits, and the little bits to tiny bits, and the tiny bits to microscopic bits, and the microscopic bits to bits of rock so small, even an atom didn't seem all that small in comparison with them. After Tirek had finally blasted his final rage-energized beam at the remaining microscopic bits, he realized he was only making things worse for himself. So, he decided to unleash a wave of ki so powerful, he thought it would completely atomize the rocks, rendering them powerless. He thought. Tirek glowed with a flame-hued aura, and he wrapped his hands on opposite shoulders, then whipped his arms outwards, and the glow surrounding him exploded, engulfing all the rocks in its fiery grasp. In fact, it almost got me, but I teleported far away enough that the blast wouldn't reach me. From afar, I watched everything in the field of Tirek's energy being heated so much, it instantly got vaporized. I clenched my fists tight in disapproval of this mass destruction, until Tirek was finally satisfied with the pure obliteration he had caused to this land and the rocks. He smiled, and to my amusement, he gasped when he felt the pain of even more powerful pebbles. He couldn't think of any other way to stop this, so he simply waited, trying his best to defend against this massive onslaught. Finally, I realized I couldn't keep this up much longer. The skull took up a considerable amount of stamina, and released the technique, causing a universe-distorting explosion that tripped the battlefield into a wasteland so barren, you'd scoff if someone said this used to be a plentiful plain. Following the explosion of the persistent rocks, Tirek stood, seeming much less confident than a few minutes previously, and a lot less calm. Is this your idea of a joke? You insult me by hitting me with tiny stones. How dare you? Tirek roared with utter, blistering fury. He then charged up an almighty amount of energy in between his horns, grinding his teeth, his eyes showing only one emotion, pure rage. The air around his ki got distorted, and just then, I snapped out of my daze, and held my hands together, collecting every last ounce of ki left in me into one ball. We held our stances for 2 minutes. Both of us staring daggers at one another, neither of us blinking or breaking eye contact for even 1 second. Miss Winged Pony, I noticed, was watching us with her jaw hanging the entire time, to which I responded with a brief chuckle, then continued focusing power into this one final beam that would settle the match once and for all. At the exact same moment, our voices exploded, both of us releasing everything we had into this final collision of energy. I yelled, "Hi-ya!" directing my hands in the direction of Tirek, releasing a true Kamehameha at the very limits of my strength. Tirek lowered his head, and thundered, "Demon Annihilation!" firing a blast identical to the Kamehameha except the color. At the initial meeting of the supercharged energy waves, the entire solar system flashed with a blinding light that made everyone on the planet cover their eyes for a brief moment. Everyone opened their eyes when the light vanished, and the purple, winged pony, who was in the corner of my sight, seemed to be worried, and for good reason. Though I had just healed, and I put even the smallest drops of ki from the back of my reserves into the Kamehameha, Tirek's demon annihilation was winning this struggle. I got deja vu from Gohan's beam struggle with Cell, and tried to do the same thing Gohan was doing throughout, channeling even more power into the Kamehameha. Surprisingly, it worked, and the beam was advancing towards me at a slower pace, the blast of wind on me getting slightly slower, and I roared a battle cry, which actually made the beam Tirek was shooting slowly inch towards him. I narrowed my eyes so much my eyes may as well have been closed, and I clenched my teeth tight, then forced myself to relax my whole body, putting any amount of concentration into the arms, that were the only thing stopping Tirek's incredible mountain of energy from reaching my body, and sealing the fate of the entire universe. Tirek chuckled, which I nearly didn't hear over the deafening roar of the two energy giants. He then put even more power into his blast, and pushed me back, as well as my beam. I planted my feet deep knee-deep into the ground. However, it wasn't enough to stop the enormous force from pushing me slowly, but surely backwards, coming closer and closer to wiping out this world's final hope. With this thought in mind, I resisted Tirek, even though it would have been much easier to give up. I completely shut my eyes, and I cried out something I hadn't in well over a decade. Kaioken times 20. Instantly, my energy jumped up 2 times, and I pushed back Tirek until the beams were dead in the middle, and my already huge aura of jumbled red and blue energy exploded with insane intensity. Already, I was feeling the side effects of the technique. My muscles ached, my veins throbbed painfully, it was suddenly hard to even stand, and if you didn't get the hint already, this hurt a lot. I was finding it's hard to even concentrate on the Kamehameha, but I knew I had to focus, so I did my best to relax, and removed all thoughts in my head, the whole of my mind and body being focused into the beam, and I slowly opened my eyes to see how my blast was faring against Tirek's. To my appall, it was still in the middle, as Tirek had released any suppression he'd put into the attack. I bit my lip and closed my eyes, once again going into Zen mode. I was startled by the loud pop that stood out clearly in comparison with the steady flow of sound resonating from the beams and their clashing. I looked to see the pony that had been watching the whole time, along with the weird-looking mishmash of a bunch of different species, who looked really goofy. Despite this, he wore an expression of seriousness that didn't suit him at all, and he nodded at the pony, who nodded back. The creature who I'll just call Chaos clawed at the air, and ripped a hole in the dimension the size of a beach ball, then literally grabbed the rip in the fabric of space and time, making it bigger and bigger. In his other hand, Chaos created a ball of black energy, which looked identical to the rip in time and space, except this was crackling with red streaks of a lightning-like substance, and he combined these two balls into one even bigger one, making the black Chaos time-space ball increasingly larger. Beside him, the winged pony charged her horn, the magic source sizzling with barely contained, swirling purple magic, the aura surrounding the horn getting bigger and more powerful. It was just then that I realized what they were doing, and I smiled, looking back at the beam struggle between me and Tirek. The huge masses of energy pushed at each other repeatedly, but they still stayed relatively in the middle the entire time. I heard a faint sound as I saw Chaos and the pony had charged their attacks to full power, and they moved to beside me, releasing their full power. The powerful pony fired a truck-sized beam similar to the Kamehameha, surrounding us in a vibrant layer of energy mixed with magic. Simultaneously, Chaos unleashed his ball, the energy retaining its shape, but a straight arc of black energy surrounded by red swirls protruding from it. The three of us were engulfed within a huge mix of powerful energy, the aura-colored black, blue, and purple. The fight was being won. The tiny boost in my attack strength was enough to push back Tirek. Unfortunately, it seemed he still had a small amount of energy left, and he boomed with a deafening voice, "Yeah." With that battle cry, he pushed us back rapidly, but I wasn't having it. "You can do it, you two. We just need to focus, and pour out the last of our strength into this. Remember, don't hold even 1/1,000,000th of your power back, otherwise, Tyrek's demon annihilation would do just that, annihilate us. I yelled with all the bravado I could muster in this increasingly worse and worse situation. They both nodded, and I was about to look back at the nearing beam, but then the pony said, "Wait, if this is going to be our last stand, I don't want to do this without knowing who you are, just in case this last stand really is our last stand." I agreed and replied, "My name is Goku, I'm a Saiyan from Earth. Who are you two?" "I'm Twilight, pony princess from this land, Equestria." The pony I now knew was Twilight said. I looked towards Chaos, who wasn't actually called Chaos. The name's Discord, god of chaos and disharmony, from this place as well. Now, if you don't mind, I would like to stop this monstrosity before this really gets out of hand. I shook my head in agreement, and together, Twilight, Discord and me looked towards Tirek, and yelled a chorus that resounded throughout the land. Hi-ya! All at once, our blasts literally broke our limits, and it shattered Tyrek's demon annihilation in a split second, this ultimate beam flying towards Tirek thousands of times faster than superluminal speeds, and engulfed it, in comparison with the beam, tiny Tirek in its ultra-hot grasp, and he yelled in pain, all confidence wiped away in an instant. The result of this was an ear-shattering explosion, that made a resounding boom. This created a mushroom cloud explosion, that the three of us shielded ourselves from, and an enormous cloud of dust was left, obscuring Tirek from view. Chapter 5 The Celebration. I coughed as the last remnants of the explosion cleared, and I looked up, to see Tirek lying face down in the dirt, this time not faking it, as evident from his ki flow. I took a deep breath, and released it along with Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken times 20. "It's finally over," I said, letting a smile creep onto my face. I looked over at Discord and Twilight, and gave them a thumbs up. Twilight grinned widely, and jumped on me, capturing me in a crushing embrace. "Thank you so much for your help. We couldn't have done this without you." Thank you, I shouted in pain, and Twilight jumped off, bewildered and concerned. "What's wrong, Goku?" I groaned feebly, and then responded in a somewhat annoyed manner. "My technique is very powerful, multiplying my strength 20-fold, but it has devastating side effects. It hurts a lot after, especially if someone touches me," I said, emphasizing someone and looking at Twilight in an accusatory manner. She chuckled briefly at this, then after a few moments, she coughed and spoke again. "Well, I think I can help you with that, just wait a second." Twilight lowered her head and her horn glowed faintly, then she shot a beam of purple light at me, and I felt all the scrapes and cuts being healed, as well as my energy being slowly restored. I looked down at my recovering body, and said with amazement, "Wow, this is a really useful technique. I kind of wished I was a winged unicorn, just so I could do this. If I had this, there would have been a lot of villains I could have beaten much easier with this." Twilight breathed heavily and responded tiredly, "Well, first of all, the term is alicorn, and secondly, I don't recommend you use this spell in battle. The biggest reason is, as you can see, it drains you completely, though huff, it restores magic. It doesn't work on yours." Twilight was cut short when her eyes closed, and she collapsed on the ground. I quickly dashed beside her, and shouted, Twilight, are you okay? Twilight." I kept shaking her lightly, but she didn't answer. "Darn it, she's out cold," I muttered. "Hey, Discord, we need to bring her to a hospital or something." Discord vanished into thin air, then reappeared right in front of me, and the unconscious Twilight, startling me. Then, he said in a mischievous manner, which I just happened to feel he often spoke in, "Oh, there's no need for that." He then snapped his fingers, and immediately, she opened her eyes, then looked around for a while. "What happened?" she asked, looking at the two of us. I was talking, then everything went black all of a sudden. Discord chuckled, then answered, "Oh, you just fainted from your tiredness. Then, with my awesome powers, I gave you your strength back. Good thing Tyrek's strain wore off. Otherwise, Equestria would be toast, and you'd be lying flat on the ground." Twilight rolled her eyes, then was about to say something before I interrupted. "Wait, What's he talking about? Could you fill me in on what happened? Twilight's eyes opened wide, and she nodded her head. Right, I forgot you've only been here for less than an hour. So basically, Tirek can't steal magic, and he stole every piece, including Discord's magic, which happens to be the strongest in Equestria, other than me with the power of the 3 other princesses. Thankfully, Discord's magic is so chaotic, it can come back without it actually coming back, if that makes any sense. I blinked, then nodded slowly, trying to process everything Twilight had just said, as it was a lot to take in, and she was speaking pretty quickly. Just then, my stomach rumbled, and I laughed. Hey, do you have any food? 'Cause I'm starving. Twilight and Discord fell down, then Twilight got up slowly. We just saved the universe, and you're thinking about food? Twilight asked incredulously. In response, I just scratched my head and laughed. She sighed, and beckoned with her wing in the direction of her home. Then she realized it was destroyed. Well, I'll arrange something later, but I just remembered something. Twilight looked at Discord. Remember the chest? Oh yes, we really should open it. I have a feeling it's pretty important, Discord said. Then he wrapped his arms around the 2 of us, and we appeared in front of a big glowing tree, as well as 5 other shocked ponies. Man, Discord has got some awesome magic. The cyan pony with wings went airborne as soon as Discord released her, and she shouted, "What's going on? What about Tirek? Why are we at the Tree of Harmony?" With each sentence, she spoke more urgently and louder. Whoa, Rainbow, you need to calm down. To answer your questions in order, this guy beat Tirek, and I remembered the chest, Twilight said, pointing at me, and making the blue pony look confused at seeing a creature so different from her. Secondly, Tirek is unconscious, and we'll be bringing him back to Tartarus shortly. And finally, well, I already answered that one. The pony apparently called Rainbow smiled, and cried, "Awesome. That Tirek deserved it." She flew high up in the air at high speeds, then crashed down almost instantly. Oh yeah, so how do we get our magic back? Discord's just weird, so he gets it back, but what about the rest of us in Equestria? Discord gave Rainbow an amused look, and Twilight responded, right. Well, we'll get to that later, but I think we should put the final key in right now. I think we have to do it together. Everyone but me and Discord nodded, and they walked to a chest in front of the tree called the Tree of Harmony. Then Twilight lifted the necklace that was hanging around her neck above the chest, and it suddenly became engulfed in a glow, and magically became a key that inserted itself into the last hole. All of the ponies gathered around the chest, and twisted their respective keys. Immediately, the chest was surrounded in a bright light, and Rainbow spattered from it onto the Tree of Harmony. The 6 ponies made a sound of both delight and surprise, and 6 trails of light streamed out from the center of the tree into 6 crystals that glowed vibrantly, as soon as the light touched them. Powerful light rained down on the 6, and shrouding them in an aura similar to his, but they didn't look concerned, only surprised. What happened next I still can't clearly recall. There was a lot of transformations, beams, light, flying, magic, bubbles, ponies being absorbed, and most of all, I felt an overwhelming power emanating from the 6 magical ponies, a limitless supply of power that far surpassed my own. I'd even say, it rivaled Xeno's strength, if it wasn't exactly on par, by which I mean they couldn't be stopped no matter what. So, you probably can't tell what happened from the last bit of words, so I'll put it simply, the pony/environment/the universe got their magic back. The 6 super ponies got funky hairdos, even more weird than before. 3 alicorns that looked like princesses came from Tartarus, and the chest buried itself into the ground, creating a massive crystal castle that towered over the small village next to it. After everything happened, I walked up to the 6 super ponies, who weren't super anymore, smiled, then asked, "So, can we eat now?" Twilight looked at me, as if she had forgotten about me in the battle, then she looked shocked about something. My smile dropped, and I worriedly asked, "What's wrong? Tyrek's still out there?" Twilight shouted in a panic. Then, she relaxed, and added, "But if we gave all the magic back, he must be really weak." I nodded and said I'd take care of it. I focused for a long time, then found the weak signal. Wow. He is weak without stolen magic. I can barely sense him, I exclaimed. Then, I used instant transmission to go directly to where Tirek was, and I saw he was very small at that moment, walking slowly with his back turned to me. Hard to believe he was once a threat to the whole universe. Hey! I shouted at him. Tirek froze and turned around to face me. He cursed and then sighed, holding out his arms in front of him. You've caught me. Take me back to Tartarus. Right now, you're so far above me, I'm not even on the same plane of ability, the tiny Tirek quietly said. I pondered for a moment, then I answered, you know, I could convince Twilight to let you become a citizen of Equestria. Tirek looked shocked. You can't mean that, can you? He whispered with hopefulness and curiosity in his voice. I nodded. Tirek was speechless, but after 5 or 10 seconds, he nodded back and, so I used instant transmission to bring us back. Needless to say, Twilight was in utter disbelief and shock at my suggestion, but she soon was persuaded. I mean, I guess if he became reformed, he could be a powerful ally, being able to steal magic from many enemies. Alright, we'll try. But first, I think you said you wanted food. My mouth watered at the mention of a meal, and I nodded quickly. Twilight laughed momentarily, then showed me to a dining room with a table, filled with stacks upon stacks of delicious food, from cakes and pastries to ice cream. There was an endless array of sweets as well as a few familiar savory foods, and a couple of weird ones, like hay sandwiches. 2 alicorns with flowing mayonnaise, a very pink alicorn, Discord, and the 5 ponies from earlier were gathered. Tirek was outside the dining room, waiting for our introduction. Everyone except the white alicorn I found out was Celestia and Twilight were shocked at how much I could eat. In fact, her eating was almost at the same level as mine. Luna, Cadence, Rarity, Rainbow Dash, Fluttershy, Applejack, Pinkie Pie, and Discord were all great, but I think I like Twilight and Celestia the most, but not just because of this. Of course, some of the gathered pony/Discord were less surprised than others. Rainbow, Pinkie, and Discord to be specific. I had a really good time, and at the end, Twilight and me brought in Tirek to everybody's horror. But then, Twilight explained everything, and in the end, though still with some doubts, they all agreed on teaching Tirek about friendship. Right before I went to leave the dimension with my upgraded, and slightly overdramatic, version of the instant transmission, Twilight asked, how did you know we were in trouble and how'd you get here? Oh, well, I'm a king of everything in training, and so I can sense any universe-level terror with my omniking sense, and because of that training, I can literally travel anywhere, even in between dimensions. Of course, just because I'm one of the highest-ranked people in my dimension, doesn't mean I'm a free man. I obviously will be made to write the tale of what happened in my special writing notebook, and the Grand Priest is gonna make me use complicated words I have no idea what the meaning of is. He thinks it'll teach me something, but so far, I haven't learned a thing about writing. I sighed and scratched my head. I can't wait till I'm king of all those universes, then I don't have to do anything anyone says, and I can just train and battle Vegeta all day long. I smiled with joy at that thought, then snapped out of it, and shook my head. Sorry about that, I'm getting off topic. Anyways, it was really nice to meet you all, and I'll see you all sooner or later. I waved my hand, but before I could go, Twilight gave me one last sad hug. I'll miss you, Twilight said. I'll miss you too, I answered, grinning amiably. Then, she let go, and I gave one last look at this bunch of wonderful ponies, and of course you, Discord, only now wishing I had gotten to know them better. The only one I kind of knew well was Twilight, and even her I didn't know much about. I frowned, then turned away, so I wouldn't have to see them again and become sadder. Then, I pressed my fingers on my forehead, looking for the energy signal of my dimension, and once I got it, the urge became too much, and I looked back one more time, tears threatening to spill. These ponies are so cheerful and interesting. I hope I really do see them again someday in the future. Goodbye, my new friends. Goodbye. With that final silent farewell, I focused energy into my fingertips and I disappeared with a loud bang. leaving the group gathered to be startled. And so, that ends the story of this battle, and of the friends I met. I haven't found a way yet, but I'm getting closer to finding a way to go back to that magical land without needing to sense a universe-level threat. Once I do, you can bet I'll tell you all about it, but for now, sayonara.
That's all, Zipsters! Like and subscribe.